Good afternoon. We're just going to wait for everyone to join the webinar. We'll just be a couple of minutes.
So during the webinar, we will have some live elements, including a poll and question and answers. You should be able to see a question box on the bottom right of your screen right now. At any point during the webinar, feel free to submit something and we will do our best to pick it up at the end with the question and answer session. Right, today's webinar will be around flexible working, reducing costs and boosting productivity in your SME. My name is Marcus Johnson and I'm the director for Michael Page in the Thames Valley.
And I'm Donna Croucher, and I've spent the last 20 years recruiting in finance and HR across the Southeast.
So we'll be learning about what we'll be learning about in today's webinar. We'll be talking about diversified benefits and working cultures and why they're growing in popularity. Why should you adopt flexible working this year? We'll run through the poll, how to overcome obstacles in making the change, tips on implementation, and then we'll finish with a question and answer session. Okay, so how can we define flexible working? There are many misconceptions about the notion of flexible working, particularly amongst smaller businesses. Many people immediately think of flexible working as something for working mothers or as reduced hours in the working week. We define flexible working as simply a new way of thinking and a more dynamic approach to the way in which people deliver on their day-to-day responsibilities. And I'm sure we all know people who work this way.
So I'm an operational recruiter, and I meet senior candidates and clients every day as part of my job. And every meeting I have now talks about flexible working. When I meet candidates, and these are in particular senior candidates, they're asking about companies' procedures around flexible working. So if we're not talking about it to our clients, we're missing a trick, because this is something that the top talent are asking for. So if you want top talent, is something that you need to be thinking about offering. So before we go on to talk in more detail about what that's going to look like, I just think it's important to clarify what we mean by flexible working. And talking to clients and candidates, as I say, daily, there are three main areas they look at. They look at flexible working, and in that area they mean reduced hours or flexibility around hours, staggered hours, early, late starts, etc. They talk about agile working, and that mainly refers to the location that someone works from. So it could be working from home, but it could be working on the train if they've got a long commute in the morning. And then there's dynamic working, and that tends to incorporate both agile and flexible working. So although the topic of this webinar is flexible working, I think it's important to look at it as more than just the hours. It's looking at the location and the dynamic nature of this as well. So how can we get flexible working to work in practice? Yes, there is the part-time element, and that means working less than full-time hours. Most common, this means someone working fewer days in the week, but it could also mean working less hours in a day. Job sharing, that's often when two or more people will do the work for one full-time role, and we've got a case study to run by you in a little while around that. With job sharing, this tends to mean that responsibilities are split for one job between two or more individuals. Working from home, increasingly popular with candidates. In fact, when I talk to candidates about their job searches, and when I meet them for the first time, they ask me about salary, and we talk about salary requirements. The next question is, how flexible are the working arrangements? So this is before bonus or pension or any of the additional perks. Is how flexible can they be? And that working from home is an increasingly popular question. Staggered hours, so this is an example of dynamic working where the person has a different start or finish or break time to other workers based on what they need. Phased retirement, so with the default retirement age slowly being phased out, older workers can choose how they'd like to continue working and at what times. And then there's an aspirational way of working, which is term time work. For a lot of people working in education, we're seeing this come through a lot more, particularly important for parents who are trying to balance that out. The perception of flexible working is changing massively. So when I started working flexibly, being a part-timer was a derogatory term for somebody that would come in late or leave early. So it's about how can we improve the perception in the workplace to make it much broader than that. And I think it's also important to recognise that flexible working isn't important to everyone, and it does depend on where they are in their career or their lives as to how important they see this as a benefit. But it is something that is important to most people at some point in their career. So it might not be when they're starting their new job, but it may be that they need to adjust their hours around their lives at a later date.
Great. So we've got a case study here. I suppose we were working with a finance team. Our client had a situation where they had a maternity returner. Unfortunately, they couldn't facilitate 2 days a week only, so they hired someone else to do a job share with them. Now the two candidates work over and above the hours that if they'd have hired one person, and this has naturally increased productivity as they continue to conclude their tasks on a day-to-day basis. I suppose we're now going to move on to talking about why diversified benefits and working cultures are growing in popularity in the UK.
I think being able to manage teams remotely is becoming more and more realistic for businesses of any size. It's not just the large corporates that are offering this. It's increasingly the SME businesses who want to attract top talent. But to make that happen, SMEs need to have the right processes and technology in place, but that technology can actually help improve communication across those businesses and make people easier to manage because of these new business tools. So we're seeing more and more communications going through software like Skype, which means the meetings that don't need to be face-to-face are happening on Skype. We're also seeing staff communicating much faster and making it much easier for them to complete tasks, because most software is now cloud-based. So remote access is easy to organise, meaning all the staff can complete tasks without needing to be in a central head office. Groups of people who are interested in this flexible working, you'll see a graph coming up on your screen now. It shows that it's important to all groups of people throughout their working careers, and that flexible working allows for that without much investment from the employer at all.
Great, thank you, Donna. On the slide, you can see some information from a graph from CIPD on flexible working trends in the UK. Won't surprise you that women still have more flexible working arrangements than men, with 31% versus 23%. Millennials are a group with the lowest flexible working arrangements, but from the same report, the core of this age group, 25 to 35-year-olds, have the lowest percentage of part-time jobs with no flexible working arrangements currently. Millennials prefer to choose companies that can offer dynamic working. This is because dynamic working is all about building your job around what works for the individual. We believe the gig economy and the number of young people freelancing or starting their own projects could be a big reason why this age group demand flexible working. Companies able to adapt to those demands could win some really great talent. The key to understanding whether or not to offer flexible working is to think about how it will affect the person's productivity in your organisation.
You can also see that other important age groups to take from this graph are the parenting years, where, like me, there's an increase in flexible working arrangements needed. And I think working around childcare is really significant for a large proportion of our economy. The other spike, as you can see, is in the older age group, where we may be taking care for ageing parents or phasing into retirement. But I think, coming back to my earlier point, the stage of the life that you're in has a massive impact on what you can offer your working life, but also why you might benefit from flexible working. And it's also, alongside this graph, worth bearing in mind that mental health is another key driver behind the decision for many businesses to implement these policies.
Okay, within HR and finance, for example, there is a good gender balance. Companies who offer proactive and positive working policies will benefit from a more engaged workforce. Also, you may become more competitive as a business when competing for top talent. And as Donna said earlier on, candidates are looking more and more for companies who offer a diverse, flexible working policy. Where you live also impacts on what extent flexible working is popular. Michael Page have created the Gender Flex tool that gives some insights into where flexible working exists across the country. So we'll now just take you through all the regions of the country that you can see. The East Midlands has made the most progress on flexible working in the past year. 35% reported their employer has no work from home policy, the highest percentage in the UK. However, 76% also stated that the ability to work flexibly was either fairly or very important to them. So there is quite a disconnect there, and something I'm sure they'll be working on. The East of England work comparatively few hours over those contracted. Workers in the East of England are working an average of 4.3 hours per week over their contracted hours. This is in fact among the lowest in the UK, where the average is 5.5 hours. London, feeling judged at work, you're not imagining it, 65% of office workers in London who have worked or asked to work flexibly have felt judged or penalised for doing so. The highest rate of working from home also came from London. 32% claim they work from home at least once every week, so are ignoring how their colleagues feel. London's ability to work flexibly has improved in the last 12 months, with 31% having the biggest change of any UK region. So it's going in the right direction.
Looking at the northeast, they enjoy amongst the shortest commutes to the work in the UK, but they would gladly travel further for the right perks. Only 4% of workers that we surveyed spent more than an hour getting to work, meaning that getting to work is far less taxing in that area than other regions. In the northwest, workers in that area are much more likely to work from home. So a quarter of the people in the northwest work from home at least a day a week. In the southeast, that's been rated the least flexible region in the UK, which is surprising because the respondents there, when we asked them about their employers' flexibility, they scored it just an average of 6.3 out of 10. This could be down to the fact that 30% of businesses working in the southeast don't have any kind of flexible working. In the southwest, this region has been rated as the most flexible in England, scoring 7.1% out of 10, supported by a high uptake of flexi time, time in lieu, working from home options, and very few respondents in the southwest felt penalised for working flexibly. In Wales, flexible working is most important to Welsh employees, with 76% of Welsh office workers saying that flexible working is either fairly or very important to them, which is the highest in the UK. So why should you adopt flexible working this year as an SME? And the first thing to bear in mind is the reduction in staff-based costs. Flexible working can help reduce costs in most businesses, particularly around a retention of workforce. So if you're looking at lateness, absenteeism or sick leave as something that's affecting your SME, they could be greatly reduced if staff are able to work more flexibly around their personal lives. Staff are more engaged in their work and they have more options over the office hours, then they might not get as burnt out or be truant from work due to personal reasons. But flexible working can also reduce other staff-related costs. It can allow companies to extend core service hours to work around not only the individual's preferences, but also reducing the need for overtime. It can reduce employee turnover and recruitment costs from disgruntled employees, but it will also retain your staff and cut down on training costs and all the costs associated with that settling in period for new employees too.
Like all of us, we're always looking at increasing productivity, but also building trust and loyalty with our workforce. Okay, our framework here shows the relationship between increasing flexibility and its impact on your business and productivity. Having the right tools in the organisation is one factor of driving productivity. The other is the human factor. How your staff perform is dependent on lots of different things, and ensuring they are happy and engaged in their work is hugely important. Employee attitude has a big impact on productivity and business performance. Staff who are engaged with the business are more likely to feel efficiently, and this will improve the trust and loyalty of staff in your business. Generally, most staff productivity will improve the longer they have been in the role as they learn on the job. Investing in employee education and training is really key for smaller businesses to keep the company competitive to the rest of the market. When considering adding flexible working to your business, you should consider if staff are set up to be able to train remotely as well. Making sure they have the right technology to learn when it suits them is important to boosting productivity.
Absolutely, and trusting staff to work dynamically can make them feel lots more valued and trusted by the company that they work for, so less likely to leave. I think treating staff fairly will have a massive impact on retention, and that's critical to growing the knowledge base in any business. With a retained workforce, your company will include staff with specialist experience relevant to your business, and in a time when it's tough to attract talent, we don't want to be losing it. Trusting staff to work dynamically can also mean that they're happier, as Marcus has just said, as they can support their personal lives more easily. And dynamic working will facilitate family-friendly working by enabling time for school runs or nursery drop-offs. It can also allow people to pursue hobbies or interests or sport that they want to do by coming in a bit later in the morning or leaving earlier in the evening without reducing productivity or output. I think all these factors contribute to company culture, staff retention, trust, and therefore productivity.
Great. And in many industries, finance and HR in particular, large blue chip organisations have significant advantage when competing for top talent. But in an age where work-life balance is a top priority and professionals are increasingly valuing culture above other pull factors, SMEs can really set their business apart from the competition. Having been with Michael Page for 13 years, there's definitely been a shift in those high caliber candidates wanting to go to large blue chips as their first option. They want to join a business with flexibility and where they can impact on the organisation. By having good flexible working policies, there is a big impact on the business when it comes to hiring talent. I also head up our key account for quite a large pharmaceutical business, and they are just starting the journey of implementing flexibility, and they've come to us to discuss that and how we can attract talent. So SMEs have an advantage that they're able to maneuver much quicker and implement policies much faster than global organisations. So it's something that we can look at if it's something we want to discuss further. I suppose the next thing is how we can boost your job adverts with your benefits package. Almost half of job adverts fail to mention benefits. Many job adverts are simply a list of requirements and demands made of the applicant. This can often turn people away rather than enticing them into your organisation, particularly in competitive markets where the best talent has multiple roles to choose from. Organisations need to do more to attract talent from the first interaction they have with candidates, and this is often via the job advert. According to a Michael Page survey, the top 3 most wanted workplace benefits are flexible working, working from home options, and unlimited paid holiday time.
And I think this brings us back to my point at the beginning of the webinar, where when we're talking to candidates every day about what's important to them and what they want, if after salary, dynamic or flexible working is the next critical factor in them applying for a job, we need to be including it a lot more, not only in the conversations that we're having, but the adverts that you're running directly to recruit people into your business. I think if you look at the screen, on the bottom right, there's some stats that we've actually taken from the last 30 days. So this is real-time information on how many job adverts in the UK refer to flexibility. So we're saying all candidates are asking for it and top talent are demanding it, but in the last 30 days, only 24% of job adverts in the UK refer to it. So if we're not talking about it to our candidates and our clients, and you're not putting it on your job adverts, you're missing the opportunity to attract the right talent. So going on to the next slide, we're looking at boosting productivity and helping candidate attraction. Then I think that last point is particularly relevant, but we also need to think about flexible workers being specialists in their market. And I think if you're opening up the search to allow for people to have that flexibility in their day, you will be able to acquire far more senior talent on a part-time basis. Hiring people on any sort of flexible basis can be a great fix for a small business, because you can also bring people in to manage the peaks and troughs in your business. For finance, for example, this could be around month end, quarter end, year end. But increasingly, we're working with international businesses who are setting up really small silos in the UK, and flexible working can be really important to manage expectations when dealing with people in different time zones. So for example, recently we've been working with a couple of US businesses who have just started to build up a team in the UK, so 10, 12 people. And most of the comms and the interaction needs to be in the evening because they're on the west coast of the US, so the time zones are very different. So to attract the right talent to work in that kind of environment, they've had to be flexible with their hours. They can't expect someone to come in at 9 and work until 11 every night. So it's about staggering the hours and being more fluid with the expectation around flexible working to get the best people for that job. But there are pitfalls when we're looking at flexible working, and I think that the main way that SMEs or businesses that we talk to get it wrong is where they haven't trained the managers or the leadership teams on the benefits of flexible working and how to manage those flexible workers. But on top of that, managing the requests that they get through in a consistent style as well. The perception that I mentioned earlier of part-timers being a derogatory term or being looked at as not having the output that full-time employees would have has changed, but a lot of leadership teams that we talk to are struggling with that mindset. So I think the first thing that any SME need to get right is to train and educate the leadership team on the benefits and how to manage it, and then the perception of it and how that needs to filter down across their organisation. But unplanned requests too, because a lot of these requests don't come at the beginning of someone's career. As I mentioned, it could be part of the way through. So training management and the leadership team on how to react and how to process those unplanned requests, particularly if they don't agree. So it's how then the leadership team interact with an SME's HR department on making sure that the company policies are set, but there's compliance to the way that each request is being handled to make sure that there's limited pitfall from any request that comes through.
Great. Okay, so we're now going to start our poll. So we're about to start the poll on the questions. Are you more likely to introduce flexible working to A, reduce costs in your business, B, to help attract new candidates, C, to help retain staff, or D, to build trust and performance in your team? You should be able to see the live poll on your screen. We'll give you a few minutes to make your selection, and then we'll be back.
Okay, we can see the results coming through now. We'll talk about them in the Q&A at the end, but there's a clear winner coming through. Fine, okay, so moving on to the next slide, but as I say, we'll come back to those poll results so we can talk through those when we discuss the questions at the end. Moving on to overcoming obstacles in making this change. So this is going to include 5 steps that we believe are needed to overcome obstacles. And millennials in particular are often on their emails first thing in the morning or responding to queries well after 5:30. So if you want that productivity, that home access needs to be set up. I think the ability to sign in, as I mentioned on the commute, will mean a lot more work gets done well before even the rest of the team has signed in to work in the office in the morning. I think given the fact that handheld devices, phones, iPads are becoming increasingly popular to use and in a business setting are needed, having access to all those devices for your staff is essential for productivity. Number 2, which is establishing flexibility champions. So if your concern is making sure that dynamic working is well received by everyone, as I mentioned that perception earlier, flexibility champions might be the right solution. So these individuals should be from right across the business, the leadership team and in the core of your business to demonstrate how they make it work best for them. So this could be an individual who takes a longer lunch break but comes in an hour early, or a parent who comes in later so they can drop the children off in the mornings. But it could be even when needed, your champions rush off early to make an earlier train, but they log back in once they get home. So it's having that flexibility and those champions that are setting that mark. Step number 3 is highlighting great performance, and it's critical that this happens for both the employees in the office and those working dynamically. If there's any noticeable improvement in anyone's performance after adopting this sort of dynamic working schedule, it needs to be communicated across the business so that the whole population know it's not just the people in the office who are achieving great things.
Great. So step 4, set weekly deliverables. It's really important that the person requesting flexibility or dynamic working is aware of the deliverables and expectations. And so we got, regardless of flexibility, working from home, longer lunches or late start times, every employee needs to know their KPIs and daily responsibilities to ensure they can perform their job. When dynamic working is introduced, this becomes increasingly important to ensure that they know exactly what is expected. Step 5, consider job sharing. Where it's feasible, perhaps 2 employees could work better on a part-time basis, sharing the responsibilities of a single role on a week-to-week basis. We've just implemented this in one of the offices that I look after, with 2 really high performance sharing a job together. Job sharing is a workable solution if 2 colleagues or new starters are only able to work restricted hours. We're now going to move on to the last learning sections for today's webinar. Tips on how to implement flexible working. I think this is hugely important because if we don't get it right from the start, it can often be difficult to get the buy-in of the team later on. So we would say, first of all, step 1, determine the challenges for your individual business. We all have different challenges, so identify those within your businesses. It's important that every person in your organization knows what their flexible working benefits are and how to use them in a way that benefits the business as well as the person. Step 2, identify potential challenges. And having implemented this in Michael Page, there are people that, like the London issue we talked about, who will look at people as they leave the office. So it might be worth getting them involved in the implementation of flexible working so that they're involved in making people feel comfortable when they leave the office early.
Step number 3 is agreeing at a senior level flexibility branding. And what we mean by that is agreeing how you're going to communicate this introduction to your business. So it's not something you do at the moment. Having a think about, as I said earlier, the perception, how it's going to go down, and how the leadership team, top down, need to get bought into what you're going to set out to achieve. Step number 4 is setting the objectives and determining the benefits.
Great. And step number 5, yes, there is a cost to this, of course, allocating a sensible investment fund and making sure that it's deliverable. The worst thing would be to start the process and inform the team and then stop that. And if I look at, again, what we've had to do within Michael Page or Page Group ourselves, you know, it's usually where, think about when things are good, it's easy to implement flexible working and dynamic working, but it's almost thinking about times when it's difficult and how you're going to ensure that you still maintain the policy. And that's something to think about.
I think the last point on here is get started, because if you don't, then you're going to be behind the curve in attracting and retaining top talent in a market that is demanding it. Recruiting flexibility champions, as I said, getting their buy-in, driving this from a management perspective across the business, but keeping HR involvement. That's critical to make sure that the compliance with any business's procedures is there. So that's the end of our webinar. So we're going to move on to the Q&A session that we've put in. We're also going to talk about the poll results as well. So hopefully, if you've got any questions, you can start logging them and they'll come through. We've got some questions that have come through already. So while you're typing and sending us questions through directly now, we'll run through perhaps a couple of these, Marcus.
Yeah, great. I just want to stop there and just say we apologise. We believe there's a couple of sound issues. I hope you've got the sense of what we've been talking about, and the presentation will be sent to you after this webinar session. Okay, so do you want to talk about the poll first? Yes. So we'll start in ascending order. So with 7%, it's being implemented to reduce costs in the business. Joint 18% are to help attract new candidates, and 18% also to build trust and performance. But the biggest by far, with 57%, is to help retain staff, which is encouraging to hear. And a lot of the meetings that we go on now to meet clients that we've been working with recently, but also for a long time,
a lot of them are around how can we retain our staff, because of course we want to fill jobs, that's what we're here for, but ultimately it's about working in partnership with our HR, our finance, or any leadership teams within our businesses to help you keep your top talent, because we know why they leave businesses, and flexible working is one of the main reasons that they become frustrated with their current employers. So as you're saying, 57% of you want to retain staff, then I think it's critical that we get this right now so that you don't have to rely on us for every new placement, because actually you're seeing less of them come through. So should we run through to the Q&A questions?
Yeah, so I've had a question here. What do you mean by unlimited paid holiday time? Well, it's absolutely what it means in the question. It's unlimited time. But what we find, and where there are organisations, and I think Virgin, you'll find that one of these organisations where they don't have, set holiday times. And what you find is people work the same holiday time as they had previously, because people just do what it takes to get the job done.
I think it's managing people on their output rather than how their presence in the office. And that's something as a business that we've moved a lot to now, is it's not presence, it's productivity. So if you've built that trust and you've built that loyalty with your staff, I think it's then the next stage in that is trusting them to only take the leave that they are able to take to make sure that they're getting their jobs done. And I think it needs to be managed carefully too, because yes, if you're saying unlimited leave is there, which doesn't happen in every case, believe me, but if you're saying that you're moving to an increase in annual leave or more flexibility around time in the office, that you set really clear KPIs, you set really clear expectations with your teams, and actually that it's monitored, because a lot of people that are working from home or working remotely, they want to be involved, they want to be reviewed, and it's having that structure. So perhaps the end of each week or the end of each month, there is that review in against the target set, and then it shouldn't matter how much leave they take, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. So I've had another question. How do you manage client expectations when they expect people to be around from 9 till 5 in the traditional way? Well, I think the important thing for us is to ensure it's evidence-based. So you'll find from the research we've done with our partners that clearly a large percentage around the country expect some flexibility. But it's also understanding with the client when you go to the meetings, and we've been to lots and lots, hundreds of meetings over the years, it's ensuring we understand what are their deliverables and how we can assist them, ensuring, helping them on this journey.
So when we meet candidates and their key driver is having a flexible, let's say an hours-based flexibility, and that business can't yet offer it, it's being really frank with both parties to say, look, if you want this talent, then you need to offer this flexibility. And if you can't, then you might need to move on and look at somebody else. But it's not placing the wrong person in the wrong culture, because that means that loyalty, trust won't be there, and that retention will become a problem.
Great. I've also got another question, which is around ensuring benefits are on the job adverts. Don and I have put some time into putting this together. I think this was one of the crucial elements that we thought about, and that was around ensuring that your flexible benefits are part of your adverts. And I think whether that's Michael Page when we're writing adverts as recruiters, or externally when we're advertising adverts, I really would advocate putting the benefits down along with giving it the same level of importance as the salary. In fact, more so. And that's, I think, on that point where I would leave it.
Absolutely. Good. Well, thank you very much for attending today. I think we've had a really good turnout, so hopefully we've been helpful and given you some food for thought. But if you've got any questions or anything that you want to talk to either Marcus or myself about, if you contact us, then we'll be very happy to pick up either today or a later date.
So you can also listen to our new podcast series, Careers Chat, available on iTunes and Spotify. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.